Good morning, world. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about communication. We're going to talk a little bit about what really makes for good quality communication, and honestly, the joy of communication. I've often found that there's nothing that I get more pleasure out of usually than having a truly high quality conversation with another person, like sort of that mutual connection with another person where you're really able to share yourself, you're really able to share what's going on within you, and also just the pleasure of being able to receive what's going on inside of another person. To me is just like art in itself, right? It's like something that you're creating this experience, this atmosphere for one another, and you're sort of moving in and out of one another like that is just incredible. So I'll talk a little bit about that, where I think that comes from, how I think that's built, and just, yeah, I'm free associating, so I'm just playing with the idea purely. So I think that what good communication is really about to me, it's about actually taking pleasure in listening to another person. It's as Robert Greene would say, it's an outward focused experience. It's really reading the essence of that other person. It's being able to tune into their body language and what they're actually saying right now in the moment, who they are in front of you, like the information presented in front of you, and what you get out of that. And it's being able to let them take you where they want to take you, and to be a part of their world and to have access to their world like that. And it's funny, I often find that when I'm really listening to someone, it kind of feels like time dilates a lot. And there's just sort of this zoomed in, focused sense of like really paying attention to that other person. And there's all these little subtleties in mannerism and in speech, in feeling that you get. And for me, like I'm largely high FE, high introverted feeling, or FI, excuse me. I'm high FI, introverted feeling, and I can sort of, for me, like actually hearing another person, and really where like most of that connection comes from in listening to another person is occurring within myself. I'm someone who will sort of take that, and then like I can sort of access this reflection of their world within my world. And again, it's really about being outward focused, but I can't help that it largely does move through me, and it's like what I'm sensing. And then the pleasure is being able to actually provide that space, and like just knowing that person actually trusts you and is with you enough to actually allow you to hold that space for them in communication. And you take pleasure in being an arbiter there, and just holding that space, right? Like you don't do it in an arrogant way, you do it in a very loving way, because it's like you right now get to experience this person's inner world, and you're just, like I said, you're holding the space for that. And where that joy is expanded there for me when I'm interacting with another person, it's very much about following what I'm feeling in the situation. So I might notice like, oh, okay, so like they would tell me this thing, and I'll say to them, especially if I have a trusting connection with them, I'll say, can I tell you what I'm feeling? Or it's funny, I'm getting this sense that it's like this, and then I might say it, and they might say, yes, exactly. And there's that pleasure in the accuracy of the connection. It's like, yes, exactly, you get what I mean, and you both get to sort of like relish in the subtle skill of being able to discern and illuminate the invisible there through the conversation. But sometimes it's another way. It's like, no, that's not. It's like, no, not quite that. Or it's like, I get a lot of that, obviously, because I'm not perfect in my ability to read people. Um, it's like, no, and it's not quite that, but it's like it could be close, and you can kind of feel the vicinity of where that is, that you might, that thing you might be picking up on. You can kind of feel into the vicinity of it, and it's like, oh, okay, so for example, it might be like, oh, like you might hear someone say something, you'd be like, oh, so it seems like you sort of felt powerless in that situation. They might say, no, it's not that I felt powerless. I think I felt afraid of what would happen if I took action. And then it's like, oh, so it's similar in a way, but it's like it's also an opposite. It's like it's not that you felt powerless. It's more that um, you felt like you were afraid of your own power. You know, you didn't know what would come out of your power. It's more like there's that fear of actually what would happen if I enact here, if I take action here. And you get to sort of like explore that with someone else. And I think that once you yourself have actually experienced what it's really like to feel received, and we'll get to all that. What it's really like, when you've experienced what it's really like to feel received and to feel that love through communication or connection from another person, you basically take a lot of pleasure in knowing that you can provide that. And sitting and listening and sitting and being in that other person's space like that is something that you like, for me, I value that very highly. Like, I consider that to be an honor, and it's something that I honestly like. As in terms of flow, like in terms of flow for me personally, like there's very little that comes as high as me being able to actually really tune into what another person's saying, and also contribute and impress there. You know, not as in like impress. I mean, like impress as in like make an indent on that, and actually put yourself into their world like that, and understand what that is together. And it's like you're moving around the thoughts together, like, right, you're sort of playing with the different thought structures, that you're sort of distinguishing between different feelings, and you're sort of like, some people who are more FE, they're extroverted feeling or extroverted thinking, they tend to have this, like, actually being able to speak things out to other people is more like where they find most of their illumination. Where for me, like, it's more, I'm usually better at recognizing and traversing my inner world alone, like in an introverted sense. But I find that when I do it in an extroverted sense, there are other qualities, there are peculiar other elements that I sometimes would like, oh, like, I wouldn't been able to do that alone. I would, like, sometimes when I just have like a really good conversation with a friend, or just a random sometimes, or my therapist is pretty he's pretty fucking good at holding that space, as he should be. And it's like, I'll notice like, oh wow, because it's like the reference point I have here is drawing something else out of me that I might not necessarily have came to in the same way by myself. And I'll notice it in the sense that because I'm more introverted feeling and introverted thinking, like, even sometimes I'll be at home and I'll have like yesterday I had this day where I was at home like by myself until like 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I headed into the city right for the hustle and the bustle, everyone getting off of work, and it was one of those days where I was just having an amazing day. Like, I got up at 6 and I left at 4, right? So I've got like 10 hours of just being indoors and writing and playing with different ideas. I made a video, I wrote some blog stuff, and I'm reading, I'm in a good place. And then I went out into the city and I came back feeling terrible. Like, I felt really like violated. I just felt like I was on a crammed tram coming back, and there's like, just, I had to squeeze through everyone, and it's like and I realized in that moment, it's like, oh, the thing that I'm actually struggling with it was the ability to shift from my inner world, my more introverted state, into that outer world of the world. And it's like, sometimes I find that really effortless, and sometimes I actually crave being out in the world and meeting people and speaking to people and having these different experiences with people, like for a fair few hours. But yesterday was one of those days where I didn't even think about it. I was just like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna go out, and I met a couple people while I was out, and it was like, it was fine, but it's just, I just didn't really feel in my flow, and I was only going for an hour and a half. So yeah, there's that difference of introverted and extroverted feeling and thinking. Now, so that's more like the holding space and the listening component, which is really important. Like, I'll talk a little bit about that, the other elements of that after I explain the following piece. So the following piece, to me, is really being listened to, being received, and expressing is also just, is when you have the space given to you, and you know that that person is interested, and you know that that person cares about you and hopefully what you have to say as well, and they're invested in your inner world, and you're sharing that attention together, and you're meeting each other in the middle there, and you're traversing the what I call the world behind the words, or the world beneath the words. You're traversing that in yourself. Coming from an ex-addict, there's nothing quite like it. Because even like when I used to take ecstasy, not a lot, but I've taken my good share of ecstasy. And when ecstasy obviously just completely opens you up. You're so like, oh, I love you, man, and like, oh, I want to tell you these things. I want to listen to you, and like you're just so open. You're so your heart's so open, even though it's quite a heavily fueled experience. But for me, it's just funny because it's like over the years, I haven't done ecstasy in years now, and it's like the pleasure and the subtle joy that comes from actually being able to express myself to another person in a situation when the stars align there. It's very much like an entheogen kind of experience in a way. It's beautiful, and it's like, because the way I experience it is that there's almost like, again, there's a dilation of time dilates, and there's like a space opened up between you. And it's like, I feel like I'm trying to put words to something that's quite complex, so bear with me, but it feels like I'm dancing in that space, and I can really like let myself into that place, and I can say, and it's like I might say things that I didn't think I would say, and it's like, oh shit, I didn't think I'd say that. But you just feel like you have that much space, and it's a very also a very charged experience. And yeah, like I've had conversations with people a lot of the time where I've really felt received and listened to, and I can't help tears. It's not like a deep sob cry usually, but it's more like appreciating the moment, and like the subtlety of the moment, and what you're sharing between you right now is incredible. So being able to really express yourself fully. And I think that when you're expressing yourself, and sometimes like what happens, I guess there's like a third part where like you're both doing that. Like I have a like really, really close friend, and we tend to do this where it's like we have a way of, because we've just built so much trust and so much skill of communication. Although we're adaptive, like, our communication styles and interest change and what have you. But it's like we seem to have this unique ability to be able to both express simultaneously towards one another, and sort of it's almost like we can cross over, and we can we sort of like relish in sharing the space, and it's not happening like unconsciously, but we know we're doing that to some degree. And it's just, that's tremendous as well. It's being able to share, and to have someone else share and be the recipient, and also be the giver. And it's divine, right? Like there's a divinity to it, because it's like you're using your forms, you're using your bodies, and your expression. You're clothing your inner world in the world of symbols, and the world of mannerisms and gestures, and eye contact, and just, it's like you're using your body and the sound that you can create to go somewhere else, that is also strangely within you. And is it in the brain, or is the brain like picking up on? It's hard to know. I don't know shit. I don't know the answer to all those questions. I just know what I experience, and what I experience is that communication at a deep level is very healing. And, I'll make another point off the top of my head there and say that I actually think that it's basically necessary for a human being to develop and to grow healthily and to experience life healthily. There's a big thing going on right now with loneliness. A lot of people feel very lonely. I felt lonely a lot of the time. I can feel lonely. And, it's funny because I don't think that loneliness is necessarily that we don't have people to be around. Like, we could be in our family home with our family, or we could have friends, or we could have a partner, we could have lots of work relationships. I mean, some people are actually quite, extroverted people who do have a lot of people in their lives. I've known quite a few people like this, actually, who do feel lonely at some level. And it's a curious sort of, it's like, it's a juxtaposing statement, isn't it? Because it's like, well, why would you feel lonely if you're around so many people? And it's a quality to quantity thing, because it's not that you might not have quality interactions with those people, but sometimes it's when someone's really with you and they fucking like you and they want to really hear about you, and there's intimacy there, and you also get to provide that intimacy. You have a healthy balance of giving and receiving intimacy. You realize that it's something that is not present in a lot of interactions. And yeah, I mean, for me personally, I've thought about this a lot. I mean, I was studying mental health last year at university, and I was planning to beeline into counseling. I've since changed my mind in that regard, but I've loved psychology and therapy for a long time. But it was funny to me because I think what I loved about it so much, what I loved about the concept of being a therapist, for example, was that I loved that it seemed to pick up on something that was so incredible about human experience to me, which is the space to share, and having the space to share, but also sharing back. And I often found that in the field, there's often this sort of strong emphasis on like a lopsidedness, where it's like the therapist can't reveal elements of him or herself and must be. And although this makes sense from a certain standpoint, like you have to view stuff from the context in which it's produced. Like, yeah, in a certain sense that does make sense. But in another way, it's like that's a fucking dreadful way of developing a deep connection with a human being, because you're thwarting the authenticity between you and the other person. And if the therapist can't share themselves or can't really be themselves, it does create a lopsided relationship. And if you listen to a lot of people about, people who have tried different therapists and they've, had a long history with therapy and whatnot, there's often a sense of like, I felt like that therapist was cold and disconnected from my experience. And it's like, yeah, of course you did, because they're trained to be. They're trained to like see your experience and analyze it through their models, but they're not necessarily taught to be a part of it, because you can't really teach someone to be a part of an experience. Some people do have that innately. They have like for me, I've always had the innate sense of being able to feel into another person and to be able to receive that back. It's not necessarily a talent unless it's transmuted into a certain area, then it becomes a skill, I guess. It's more just like sort of where I'm very sensitive to people, and also, the downsides of that are obviously I can feel my childhood was awful a lot of the time because of this exact reason. I could feel everything going on in my family home and in my the relationships in my life, and they were not good. I could feel all that. And even now it's like sometimes I can have connections with people and I can feel that there's something not quite right, and most often I'm spot on about it. Sometimes I'm told that it's not quite the case, and I don't really necessarily feel as if that's the truth. I think that it's funny because to me, I take that as a bit of an insult. Like sometimes I can clearly feel there's something going on between someone, and they'll be like, no, it's nothing. And they'll say it like I just said it. And it's almost like, to me, that's gaslighting, because it's like, I know that there's a time and a place for things, and I also am aware that I tend to be someone who just goes for the throat, and I'm not really someone who tends to be that aware of time and space. Like, some people are more, okay, we've got certain things to do right now, we can't have this conversation, where for me it's like, no, unless we have this conversation, I can't do the other shit, because I need to be connected to you. I need to know that we're okay, and that there's love there. But yeah, as I've said before, we have different purposes and different, we're created for different reasons, I feel. So another interesting thing is when you're actually in these kind of conversations, there's also the sort of like being able to handle, give and also receive the nakedness of this situation. I mean, being physically naked is one thing, but you know, when you're with someone and it's like the first time you take your clothes off in front of each other, there's kind of like that chill of like, oh, but it's also very exciting. And over time, like doing that in conversation and sharing yourself also becomes, there's a excitement to it. For me, it's almost like I'm a bit of like a bit promiscuous maybe with my with my sharing. It's almost like I just want to, it's almost like I'm holding my breath until I can tell you about what I really am feeling and thinking. Or even just when I just meet people on the street straight up, it's like, for me, sometimes the best way to express myself is to say, this is what I'm feeling right now. And sometimes that's worked amazingly well with connecting with women and just people I've met, because it's like, it's that authentic expression to me is like I use the authenticity function a lot. But I feel like that nakedness, it's like we are afraid of it at some level. And I think that my observation is that a lot of people are very guarded, and we're not really in a place, we often don't really, because safety is a part of this as well. Because if you figure out how to give yourself the safety in yourself, like you change your beliefs where it's like, I'm safe to express myself, then when I speak to other people, it's like it's almost like, for me, it's like the opposite. It's like I feel unsafe when I can't express myself, because I feel like I'm not really who I am. But a lot of the time I feel like we feel unsafe to express ourselves or to really say what we're thinking, or we don't really know how to handle that. We haven't really had a consistent stream of space in our life, like be it therapy or connection with friends or just journaling or art, to actually perfect that inner self, that inner concept of ourselves, such that it's you're able to dance when that happens. Sometimes people will talk to people and we'll really look into their eyes, we'll really connect with them, and you can feel that there's a strong shying away and there's a lot of discomfort. In fact, just yesterday, when I was in the city having that not such a great time, I saw this girl in a grocery store and she's like picking out flowers, and I saw her and I like walked by and I was kind of like not a great place, and like I said, that hustle and bustle energy, and I saw her like picking out flowers. I thought it was just like super cute, and she's just like picking through these flowers. So I was like, no, fuck it, I'm gonna go talk to her. So I walked behind me, I see her and I'm like, hi, and she kind of immediately like shocked, like utterly shocked, and I was like, hi, and she's like, yeah, you know, yeah, what, and I kind of just said like, hi, I saw you with, what did I say? I said, I saw you with the flowers and I thought you were really cute. And I just wanted to say hi, because that's about the size of it. And she immediately took two very like discernible steps backwards and sort of sized me up. And we had a bit of a conversation until she could interject that she had a partner. But it was funny in a way, because that's quite normal, right? Like, I mean, a lot of people would hear that and think, yeah, of course, she doesn't know you. Or like, you could be a threat to her, or like, you know, you might be trying to sell her like your Jehovah's Witness manual on like, you know, how to get flowers for like 10% off using an affiliate link or some shit. You don't know. We don't know. We don't know what people want from us sometimes. But it's funny in a way, because I think to me where that's amazing is like when I actually reflect on it and when I really think about that experience, and it's like, there's this, it's like, to walk around with a sense of like when someone speaks to you, your immediate reaction is actually fear and to like go into a defensive. Like that's something that's like on the that's with you when you walk around. And it's not a judgment for this poor fucking girl. Like I don't know her. I don't know her story or experience or where how she's. I don't know anything about her. I don't know what her experiences are with people or with men coming up. I don't know. I'm sure of that. I don't know, but it's like it makes you think at some level. Of course, there's like problems with loneliness sometimes because we walk around on the defensive. We live in these metropolises. We walk around in these metropolises, and there's so many of us. We're tribal social creatures who yearn for love and connection so deeply. That's why if you go on fucking Netflix, everything you see is like about different gradients of love and connection. Like there's the whole Love Island and like a big booty Who Fucked Who Island season 2. That's like the more dense carnal form of love and expression, which is still important. And then there's like the subtler, like there's like the romance movies and the romance television shows, and then there's even more like deeper, more contorted, like twisted fantastical forms of that, like in the show You, for example. It's almost like this darker side of like the expression without consent and music as well. Like how much music, like just fucking go on Spotify right now, see what's big, and you'll see that it's like so much to do with love and connection. And we yearn for this love and connection because it's literally part of how we're constructed. We have these hearts, we have these expressive throats, we have this wisdom, we have this we have wisdom and we have insight. And when we confuse that with someone else, we feel like it's powerful. And it's necessary for us. But instead we have a scarcity mindset in a way, right? Because we pull away from one another and we don't really know how to fuse that together. And then we're so lonely, and because no one's really taught us how to connect. In fact, our beliefs about connection and being able to communicate with people and how we communicate is often heavily tampered with and distorted from childhood, either consciously or unconsciously. Like for me, for example, I didn't really see much relationship in my, I didn't really see much love in my parents' relationship. And I didn't see that, and I saw a lot of things that now I realize was not. I think I saw them hug twice, for example, and it's almost like to me that was normal though, right? Because it's like, yeah, of course, like why would there be like a passionate connection between them? They're like just together, and it's like, but it's like, no, that actually is how could you like live with someone and have a family with someone but not really have a deep, passionate, loving connection with that person? To me, it's like now bonkers. But when I was younger, that seemed normal, right? And it distorts your natural desire to connect. Because I mean, like, let me ask you this right now. When you're with someone who you're attracted to, or you're with your spouse, or you're with your friend, what is better than being able to really sit and understand where they're coming from, or to express where you're coming from and feel received and understood, and to express love to one another in all of its different forms? Like, for me personally, like as far as social relationships go, like I'm an introverted bloke, but as far as social relations go, like that's like the creme de la creme, like that's the best thing. And I've consciously decided that I want more of that in my life. That's why I go and meet different people, and sometimes it goes really well. I'm actually gonna go on a date tonight with a girl who I had an amazing interaction with last week at a Mexican restaurant, sitting at a Mexican restaurant, and she's sitting next to me, and you know how that conversation started? It started by me getting a sense to ask her if she was okay. And that's exactly what I said to her. I was thinking, how should I ask? And I said, my intuition told me to ask if you're okay. And we had a half an hour chat, and we spoke about all sorts of things. And there's a spark, and there's a connection. And at 6 or 7 o'clock tonight, 7 o'clock tonight, I believe, we're gonna hang out, and we're gonna get Thai food tonight instead. And it might be weird and awkward, and it's like, I don't even know you, and it might be like amazing. We might have this romantic, deep connection and spend the next 2 days together, or go to fucking another state. I don't know. That's the thing, we don't know, but we have to have some outlet for these different kinds of connection and communication in our life. Because if we don't, it's like this atrophies. And I would bet you dollars to donuts that a lot of the health issues that we're dealing with nowadays, a lot of the, mental disorders that are cropping up are basically consequences of the lack of love and the lack of connection we have in our lives. We need love and connection, and we need the joy of communication. I mean, communication is really actually just the gate or the door into that place within us, right? But we need that. So take it seriously. And I want you to make a commitment to that. If you're hearing this and you feel that spark and you feel that sense of like, yeah, like I actually get what you mean, make a commitment to that. Like, fucking make it real. Figure out how you can have more of that in your life. If you have to sit and write it down or whatever, figure out how can I tangibly have more of that in my life with my spouse or with my friends or with my family, I don't recommend everyone do that with randoms. You probably have to do a bit of work on yourself before you just go start being like, hi, I want a connection. It's like, no, you have to calibrate yourself when you're meeting new people. There are rules, but, yeah. Connection, communication, and the expression of love between one another is not a luxury. It's not like something that we treat it like it's a fucking luxury. Like once in every blue moon, I'm gonna have a deep connection with another person. I had this. No, I'm going to, but I did. It's like, I had this D&M when I was younger. It was always D&M. It's like I had this D&M outside, bro, the table, 2 a.m. I was drunk. And it's like that's the kind of thing we reserve it to. Like we're listening to cigarettes after sex and it's 2 a.m. and we have it once in a while. But it's like, no, I think I'm not saying every conversation should be like this, although maybe that wouldn't be too bad for me. But it's like, I want more of that in my life. We need that. We need that. It's not a luxury. It's it's a big part of life. And when you think about how do you want to actually live your life, for me, when I think about it, it's like when I look back, I don't want to feel like I had less of, like, I didn't take opportunities, or I didn't be vulnerable enough to actually initiate these things with people. I want to look back and think that, wow, think of all those incredible, like that connection I had with that girl, that connection I had with my friend. When I broke down crying to my mother in December because I felt like, I was in a bad position. Just true story, by the way. It enriches and it heals a lot of the time as well. We talk about healing, don't we? Like, how do we heal from trauma? How do we heal? A lot of healing from trauma, a lot of what it actually is rewriting a script. Right? Funny enough, at least the way I see it, it's rewriting a script. If you felt like if you're walking around like one of those people who, again, I'm not blaming that girl, but if you're scared of communication and connection, there's probably some blockages there at some level. And rewriting that, I think a lot of the time is actually sitting and consciously thinking. Like for me, I would do that with my introverted feeling, but you might do that with someone else. You might want to talk to someone to help you get to where you need to get to with your communications with people. And if you have a coach or a therapist, someone who can work with that with you, that's going to be of value to you. To figure out what is your connection style and how can I have more of my connection style in my life. Because if your connection style is not fulfilled, you're going to feel fucking lonely no matter how many people you have in your life, no matter how many community events you attend, no matter how many Zoom classrooms you're in, no matter how many relationships you have or Tinder dates you have or whatever, you're not going to feel like you're really with another person unless you're really with another person, if you know what I mean. And you're not going to really, and it's not just about receiving that, it's about giving that. There's a great honor that comes with giving that kind of time and space to another person. So you know, don't just expect at some point that that's going to happen to you either. Like, consciously make a choice, make a commitment to yourself that you're going to go and figure out how to have more of that in your life. Because when more of that is there, like, you'll start following a different note and a different direction. The values tend to shift. Like, some people are more objective, they're more engineer and makeup, and they don't require that level of connection. For me, it's like basically sustenance, and I'm essentially I'm starving without it. I've learned how to go without it to some degree, but I'm not good at going without it. Like, it's hard for me. And when I think about when I feel most alone, it's really because truly inside of me, there's this soul, there's this spirit that wants to connect and that wants to be understood and wants to understand others and wants to be real and wants to share the dreams and wants to be passionate and wants to be alive and wants to be safe. And sometimes that can get, what's the word? Overshadowed. It can get overshadowed by the pace of life and the pace of the world and what we feel like we have to do every day. So yeah, I think a conscious effort from all of us is important to know how to infuse more of that into our life. Anyway, that's some